back to Purdy, what I did want to mention, for me, it's less about when we're talking about the injury. Sure, like I've beat the dead horse about, well, this injury, we haven't seen other people come back. We had all of this. Okay, fine. The guy is going through it. We will see what he is as a finished project. For me, it's about something, and I'm glad because we got some very informative quotes from the quarterbacks this offseason. And so I'm going to use those to try and explain here what really concerns me, right? This offense is extremely precise in terms of how the quarterback plays in it, right? It's Shanahan's baby. Every little detail, there's a reason behind it. There's a reason why they motion. There's a reason why they shift. There's a reason why we blocked the guy's left shoulder and not his right shoulder, right? There's a rhyme and reason for every little detail in this offense. And the way the quarterback plays in this offense, too, is very detailed because your feet tell you where to go with the ball. And Trey Lance talked about this actually a little bit in terms of his improvement with footwork, because there's a rhythm to how they expect their quarterback to play with their feet in the pocket, right? There's a rhythm. And I've heard quarterbacks who play in this offense always say your feet tell you to go where to go with the ball. Because the idea is that your back foot hits the ground. First hitch, you look at 1, second hitch, you look at 2, and then third hitch, you're out of there. You don't get there, right? The ball has to come out. So there's a timing and rhythm, and everything starts with their feet. That's why they do that drill where they're over the bag, because it's about being able to move your feet in the pocket, but stay in a position where your base is always widespread and you're capable of just shuffling your hips and throwing the ball. Something Jimmy Garoppolo historically has never gotten enough credit for. He threw the ball exceptionally well with people around him, creating space to throw the ball. That did an amazing job. So when there's so much detail and so much precision that goes into an offense, Shanahan has already complained about the lack of reps throughout the offseason and how it affects his offense, right? He always uses this isn't basketball analogy, meaning we can't just come out and scrimmage and keep getting better. Like there's a process that leads to us practicing, and there's a process that leads to his offense improving over the course of the season, right? What are they always complaining about in the beginning of the year? Well, they came out in fronts that we didn't expect, or, we're not executing. We just got to execute better. And we see that execution improve because the details improve as they get more reps in the offense. Where this brings me to Purdy is that we are talking about a guy, while he's getting every mental rep, and Larry's absolutely right, he's going to be better in that area. Though I've never heard a player say, hey, crew, guess what, dude? Year 1, I was smoking it. Year 2, I'm sucking right now. No, they always say, well, Year 2 is different, man. I'm a different guy. Like, look at me. Like, they always say it. Even I'm pretty sure if we go back, Ambry Thomas might have said, hey, I'm a totally different guy. Ambry Thomas, you were a different guy. You went from a guy starting in the NFC Championship game to a guy who was playing behind Janoris Jenkins. So, yes, you were a totally different guy. That was mean. I'm sorry. That was really mean. But,
I don't know if it was mean. It was accurate.
Yeah, it was accurate, yeah.
But the point is they always say they're a different guy. That's my kind of worry. Are there going to be enough reps for the guy over the course of that offseason where this timing is very refined and now? Because you can say, hey, Brock didn't get that last year. He was only getting third-string reps. But even with that third-string reps, there was the daily repetition of, hey, this is what we want to work on. This is where the ball goes. And he was working through that and throwing it. Now, maybe he doesn't need to throw, right? Like maybe he can go through the reps. He can keep his body and mimic being in those positions. And then he said he goes through that violent motion. They called the motion violent to let us know that he's not just, flicking the towel. He's really flicking the towel. So he's apparently throwing that towel with a lot of violence. So maybe that happens. But that's my concern, Larry. And it brings my concern even more when I see a guy like Tom Brady take Danny Amendola and Julian Edelman in May to Montana or Idaho or wherever he goes, and they work on these little things with leverage and timing and stuff like that. And they've played together for how many years, and they still need to work out those slight kinks in chemistry. For me, that chemistry is the one thing I'm a little nervous about with Purdy. And I guess I was surprised by how great it was right away with guys like Kittle and Ayuk and stuff like that. And maybe it's so innate for him. It's like Jimmy and Emmanuel Sanders. He's just got an innate chemistry with all of these guys. Perhaps that's the case too. I don't want to rule that out. But that is what has me worried. It's less at this point about, hey, his arm, is he going to be throwing it? Is it going to be the same power? Is he going to have the same details and the timing? Or all of those things going to be there? Or is he going to take 3 weeks where he's got to find that timing and rhythm? Because The big difference for the 49ers this year to me is that I think there's an urgency and an understanding that the last 2 years, their biggest issue is that they've put too much on the back half of the season. And they go on these long streaks and they kind of just burn themselves out. The attrition of the football season, they don't get the 1 seed, they don't get the bye, and they just get tired and grind it out over the course of the year. Not as much last year because they had that home schedule, but definitely in 2021, they got grinded out through the back half of the year. So with starting fast being urgent, that's my long diatribe about why I'm concerned about Brock Purdy. The timing. What do you think, Krug?
Well, I think it's fair. I think it's fair. I was at minicamp. I felt like Trey Lance, there's a lot of people. Now, granted, we saw 20% of it, right? There was, if there was 5 practices, we got 1. So who knows what happened in the other 4. But in the practices that I saw, I felt like Trey Lance was equal to or slightly better than Sam Darnold. But there was also another built-in excuse there is that Trey has thrown to Ayuk. Trey has thrown to Debo and Jennings and Gray, and he knows these receivers. He knows their habits, their speed, how they break out of certain routes, so on and so forth, where Darnold did not. But nobody ever factored that in when we were talking about it. And nobody really cares, right? I mean, those are nuances that are like, yeah, so what? It doesn't matter. But it actually matters a ton.
Right.
And that's why they have throwing camps in the off season. And that's why they, that's what you really want to see is you want your quarterback to get on the same page as your receivers. And it's like, it doesn't matter if they're both wrong. It just matters that they're on the same page. It doesn't matter if they're on the wrong page. If they're both on the wrong page, it's all right. So that's the advantage that the incumbent quarterbacks have. So I kind of felt like Darnold was at a little bit of a disadvantage. So was Brandon Allen. And we're evaluating this like, oh, these guys are neck and neck. And maybe they are, but that was the advantage Trey had on Darnold. As far as Brock and the reps, Brock got live reps last year. And Darnold didn't have live reps in this offense, and Allen didn't, and Trey didn't. Really, I mean, he had a few at the beginning of the year. So I still think, even though I agree with you that live reps would help Brock be that much more in tune, I think he's probably more in tune than the other guys because he's had the most live reps of any of these 4 quarterbacks with these receivers for the longest period of time.
I think regardless of quarterback, the team, you pointed it out, the team just starts slow innately. That's what it is. And I think when I talked about this season and what's going to be most important, that's one of the things that I brought up, which was I think the 49ers, if they want to win a Super Bowl, they have to get the number 1 seed. They have to find a way to get the number 1 seed. And that means they can't start out slow. That bye week's going to be so important going into the playoffs. And we see how it can benefit a team. And I think the 49ers would benefit greatly from it. However, I think regardless of the quarterback, they could lose to Pittsburgh. I think that's a possibility. And I think you could really look at it and say, okay, well, listen, let's say Trey Lance starts. Well, Trey Lance doesn't necessarily have the confidence of the team. He's still working. I mean, he's basically hasn't even played his rookie 16 games yet. He's still working through things. Brock Purdy, although he has the confidence of the team and he came off the bench and played extremely elite last year for a period of time, he's coming off of an offseason where he hasn't had a lot of those reps. And so you could see either way the team starting slow. And then obviously if Sam starts, well, we know that he's new to the team in total. So no matter what, you could see a scenario where they potentially lose game 1. That's why I think it's so important that whoever the 49ers choose at quarterback, and it sounds like it's going to be Brock Purdy as long as he's healthy, that we as fans and obviously the team, and I think the team is probably more apt to do this than we are as fans, regardless of how it looks early, we have to be willing to play through those growing pains and see it through, because that is not necessarily what it's going to look like later in the season. And that's something that the 49ers are now talking about. They were willing to do last year with Trey Lance. This year, they're not willing to do those same things. And I think it's important for a quarterback's growth that you are willing to see it through, whether it's Trey Lance or Brock Purdy. I think they both deserve that grace.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's a perfect segue because I think you brought up a really important point that I don't know if enough people are focusing on, right? The importance of the 1 seed. I think that there's been an increased importance in the 1 seed across the NFL. This was going to be well, actually, this was my big take in 2021, and then both one seeds shat the bed. And, Green Bay lost in that, actually not stupid, very thankfully lost in that game. And then Kansas City blew that lead to Cincinnati, and 2-3 seeds went to the playoffs. But with the 17 games and with only one team getting the bye, I think with the attrition of the NFL season, we're going to see one seeds dominate these playoff runs, because that bye and being at home, like that's a double advantage. To me, it should be one or the other. But you know what? If you're the one seed over the course of the NFL season, that's big time. So credit to you. And so I think it's such a massive advantage now. It was always an advantage, but I think that advantage is increased now that you're the only team getting the bye and the 17-game schedule. So you have an extra game, more attrition on the body by the time you get to that point in the season. I think it's really, really important